Is velocity banking a scam or not? Today I hope to help answer everyone's questions about how to figure out if velocity banking works or not. A lot of times the calculations that people show don't seem super complete, or they're not comparing what people actually want to see. So that's what this video is for. I made a calculator where I compared what I needed to see in order to prove to myself what I need to know, and it turns out there's a lot of people who feel the same way, especially in the comments of this video down here. Using 7% HELOC to pay off a 3% mortgage. Oh man, that's a wild one. So anyway, we're going to dive into that little Excel sheet that I made and hopefully help you just put this idea to rest for yourself so you can get on with your life and manage your finances the way that works for you. Let's see, so I should mention here at the beginning that this is specifically for using a HELOC to pay off your mortgage. And that's because an old friend of mine asked for this topic. There are other situations where you can use it to pay off credit card debt and car loans and things like that. That's a little different. I would argue right now that's actually a more likely case for it to be worth it than this, but it's outside the scope of this my friend's question. So we're just going to stick to HELOCs for paying down mortgages early. Now the biggest problem that you run into when researching this on YouTube is the people pushing velocity banking and these HELOCs are comparing. They ultimately just compare using a HELOC to pay off your mortgage early to not repaying it early at all. It's like apples to oranges, man. Of course, the extra payments through whatever method you choose is going to be dragging it on for 30 years. And so what people ask for is to see, well, what about just normal principal payments, like extra principal? Simple, easy, everyone understands that. And that's exactly what we're going to look at. So this is maybe something you've seen before. I'm kind of assuming that you've researched the topic a little bit, because we don't need another video that just is explaining how it works necessarily. But I do plan on explaining the assumptions and the pros and the cons and kind of I don't want to use the word tricks because there's enough truth to it that it's not really a trick. It's not super honest the way it's presented most of the time. So here on the left we have your normal mortgage where it's drawn out for an eternity, and I'm using an interest rate of 4.37% because that's what I have on my primary home right now. And all that basically boils down to a monthly payment of just under $1,500. That's important because that's the payment that we're going to be using for all the scenarios. I'm trying to make a fair comparison. And we're going to assume this type of cash flow essentially. Gross income or gross take home just under $9,000. Then they make the payment with whatever method. That's the regular payment that is planned by the bank. And then they have some expenses just under $5,000. Don't ask me how I come up with these numbers. I can't even exactly remember where they came from, but I use them fairly across the board. So there's leftover $2,626 to apply to pay down the mortgage, either through extra principal or through the fancy velocity banking HELOC. So let's see, what other things do I have to set up before we dive into it? One thing to know is for velocity banking, throughout the whole video, you'll probably catch this point that your cash flow per month is like the ticket. The idea is that you're basically transferring one debt to another debt because HELOCs are calculated as simple interest, daily simple interest. So if you can lower your balance throughout the month, your interest is getting less throughout the month. You can't do that with a mortgage. The only way you lower your interest is by making a payment, typically monthly. So it's all about playing this little cash flow management game. So I have three scenarios. One where it's like one of my real cash flows that I used that ended up not being so great. The ideal one that you're typically I'm going to say sold in the velocity banking videos. And then this one I call it the HELOC compromise cash flow, where it's not as ideal as this one, but it's also not as real as this one. So take it for what it's worth. We'll dive into the numbers. think just briefly, to make sure everybody understands just enough that this video isn't totally foreign, the idea here is, so if you have a $300,000 mortgage, you take out a HELOC, let's say they give you a $20,000 limit, and you immediately apply a big chunk to that mortgage. You're essentially buying your way down through your typical mortgage schedule. And as you buy your way down into later years, your split between the interest paid and the principal paid becomes more and more in your favor. Let's see if I can show that real quick right over here. So normally you'd make one payment and your first payment would be over $1,000 of just interest and $404 of principal. But if you make that $20,000 payment, if you make that $20,000 payment, it jumps you all the way down into the equivalent of, you'd end up somewhere between here. So you jump basically 4 years ahead? Not quite, because I started in April for some reason. But you basically skip all these payments. But you're not really getting that for free, because now you have a $20,000 HELOC that's getting daily interest too. But the argument is, from the Velocity Banking guys, that that's better than keeping that debt in the mortgage. So then what happens is you have a balance, and you treat that HELOC, that line of credit, like your main checking account, and your income is going in and your expenses is coming out, and the idea is that your income is more than your expenses. That's key. And then that balance is reduced quickly, and so you're paying less interest than on the mortgage. That's the idea anyway. So what's interesting, let's just jump to the results, otherwise this video will be very long. What's interesting is, depending on the cash flow, you could get results that work great, results that are just like kind of meh, or results that are actually worse than if you just made extra principal payments. So my cash flow is all bright red because that's worse than just extra principal payments, and we'll discuss why. But I just need to reiterate this point again. When people like Sam Kwok are pushing this idea, this concept, he's comparing normal repayment to an ideal HELOC cash flow situation. And so he's like, oh, it looks great, saves you so much time. You can pay a 30-year mortgage in 5 to 7 years. And it's like, yeah, because you're making extra payments in one situation and you're not making any extra payments in the other. So we want to compare everything to the extra principal payment version. Because why would someone have enough cash flow to take out this HELOC and start Velocity Banking if they weren't willing to apply that same cash flow as extra principal? It just doesn't really make sense to me. So anyway, you can see that mine failed and did worse. The ideal one did better by 8 or 9%, and the compromise one did better by about 2%. Let me explain a little bit about what this is. So by saying, we'll just use saved interest because that's the one that I think most people care about. Saved interest versus normal repayment is basically you didn't pay 80% of what you would have paid if you repaid it off in 30 years, according to the typical plan. If you use the HELOC and things go perfectly, like impossibly perfect, instead of saving 80%, you'd save 88%, a whopping 10% increase. But you have to play that game of managing your cash flow and take on all the risk. We'll discuss that. And even if you do the compromise cash flow, which is a little bit more realistic, you gained a whopping 2%. So what do I mean? Let's start with that bad cash flow. It'll make it easier to see. And so, just so you know, what I did is, for my past data, I took 6 months just to kind of see what happened, and I mapped out the ins and outs, and blue is income, orange is expenses. And for Velocity Banking to work, the examples they always show have all your income coming in right away, and if they're trying to be a little bit more honest about it, they'll say your first paycheck comes in on the 1st of the month, your second paycheck comes in on about the 15th, and then all your expenses are at the end. Most people can't wait to just pay all their expenses at the end of the month, So then they say, well, if you put them on a credit card, you can delay it and then pay your credit card off at the end of the month. Yeah, fair, but you can't put mortgage payments and certain other like car loans and things on. There's certain things you can't put on a credit card. And most people don't get a paycheck on the first of the month. They usually get it on the 15th and basically the last day of the month. So anyway, the cash flow that I chose to use ended up actually being kind of a bad one. I chose February because Sam likes to use February, because when he's adding up his daily interest on the HELOC, February has less days. This is even a leap year, I think, right? 29 leap year? February has less days, so the sum of the daily interest that's the smallest he could ever make it look if he's only using 28 or 29 days instead of 30 or 31. Just scrapping for every little benefit he can get to show that velocity banking is a good thing. But anyway, this cash flow that I'm using is kind of backwards of what velocity banking requires. If you have a bunch of expenses in the beginning and your income comes later, that's why it failed. So it didn't play the game well, and it honestly it wouldn't have worked at all anyway, because with that cash flow, the idea is you have a $20,000 limit on your line of credit, so you shouldn't ever be able to surpass $20,000, which this cash flow would have required that I did, so I would have been stuck, and I wouldn't have been able to put any more expenses on my line of credit. So I would have had to put them on a credit card and then try to pay them off later after my paychecks came in. So it's just the work of managing that, right? The ideal cash flow that they like to use when they're selling you this idea is, well, everyone knows that you don't get paid in one lump sum per month, so they're willing to split it out into two, but they put it on the 1st and the 15th, and then all your expenses are on the last day. So that's as perfect as it could be for velocity banking, essentially. And the compromised cash flow is basically the same thing, and of course my face is covering it a little bit. But instead of all the expenses coming out on the last day, I took a little bit less than half of them and put them on the second day. So here's $2,200, and this is $47,96.30 minus $2,200. So it just splits the expenses up a little bit more. And of course I could have done a lot more work to make it like some weird average, right? But just that effect alone, you'll get to see the difference between the two. So in the summary, the ideal one, we went up to 88% of the interest was saved, and just by putting that $2,200 on the second day, it drops down to 82, so minus 6%. And compared to the extra principal payments, the simple method, well, now instead of being 8% ahead, you went all the way down to just 2% ahead, just by using a slightly more realistic cash flow. And if you don't want to play that cash flow game and just do it the way you've been doing it, you might not even come out ahead at all. So realistic-ish best case scenario, you could be 2-3% ahead compared to extra principal payments. But why go through the hassle for just 2 or 3%? If you can get 80% by just setting up automatic, extra principal payments per month and then not worrying about it, it seems like most of the benefit for almost no effort, and then all the effort for just a sliver more potential benefit, but also the risk that it blows up too. So like one of the touted benefits of using the velocity banking HELOC method is that the HELOC now becomes your emergency fund. So you don't have to have money sitting around not earning any interest. Well, what if you just make your lump sum payment of $20,000 and you get some income, one of your paychecks comes in on the first of the month, which I don't get paid on the first of the month. So now you have a little over $16,000 on your balance. What if you have a $6,000 emergency? You can't go over your $20,000 limit, so you can't pay for that emergency in full. So now put it on a credit card and hope that nothing else happens where you can actually pay that off by the time your HELOC becomes available to use again. So like by the time you get down under 14,000, now you transfer that 6,000 back to the HELOC, because your HELOC interest rate is probably way better than a credit card interest rate, right? But what if that emergency involves you losing your job and now you don't have enough cash flow to manage both of these debts anymore? It could spiral out of control super fast. Where the safety in the other method is the extra principal is you can just turn that off. And yes, you're still on hook for your regular payment, but you're on hook whether you use whichever method you use. You're on hook for that. You're on the hook for that no matter what. So it's only worse as far as the risk levels go. Man, you know, part of me really wanted this to work out when I first started researching it. I'm like, yeah, that, you know, daily interest, you know, simple interest, not amortized. It's starting to make some sense. And I really wanted it to work because I actually have 3 mortgages, and I was hoping to pay those off just lightning quick, you know, like everybody wants. And the more I researched into it, the more it seemed like, okay, this Sam guy is selling some magic beans that are really just black beans. Black beans suck. They're not even pinto beans. And, geez, it's a little scammy. But there's just enough truth to it where it's like, yes, it could actually be better. It could work. That it's not completely snuffed out. You know, like all good lies and scams have enough truth for people to just believe them enough, right? But oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention this. And this calculation is done with the same 4.375% interest rate applied to both scenarios, which you'll almost never get. At least not that I've ever seen. The only way you could swing that is if you get the mortgage, you know, at one point, and then later on rates drop, and then you can get a HELOC at the same or lower rate, but then you could refinance at a lower rate then too. Like at any given even period in time, HELOCs are always more expensive than regular mortgage rates. So that just almost completely wipes this like off the board, right? So like he has that video where it's like, can you use a 7% HELOC to pay a 3% mortgage? It's like, yes, it'll still work. It's like, yeah, but that's stupid compared to paying extra principal payments, okay? So just to put this in a little bit more perspective, if you compare the compromised HELOC example to the extra principal example, by doing all that fancy footwork, managing your cash flow, you finish 6 months sooner. Assuming your rates are the same. If your rate's worse, these numbers just get worse and worse. You save just under $5,000, which over the course of the 6.5 to 7 years is about $60, $63 less per month. So zoom out for a second. People want to do all this work to get this slim margin of benefit, when in reality, if they just go out to eat one less time per month, they're already saving more money than this will gain them. Or like, just look through your closet and sell a few clothes or something. Like, man, that's a lot of managing your cash flows. You're taking on a lot of risk and doing a lot of extra work for $63 a month. And this is someone who's already bringing in almost $9,000 a month. Jeez, it just doesn't pay. It just doesn't pay. Okay, so let's keep going. So yeah, even in the best case scenario that I could set up, actually put that over here, ideal versus extra principal, even in the best case scenario, you only do 8% better. And you get 80 the simple way, you get 88 the complex way. Talk about diminishing returns. And these numbers all assume that you didn't pay somebody to help you learn how to do this and get set up. So I'm guessing that's what's happening with some of these other guys is they, you can see it in the comments on his videos. Someone will ask a question, it's like, hey, would this still work in this situation? It's like, wow, thanks for really, taking the time to research and do your due diligence and learning about this velocity banking. Come to my webinar. It's like, well, what do you think is going to happen in the webinar? They're not going to answer their specific questions. They're just going to try to sell them something else, some little plan, where now this number is even less because you have to take out what you paid to gain the knowledge to start. So it's crazy to me. It just doesn't pay. And I should be careful and just specify, for using a HELOC to pay off your primary mortgage with nothing else happening. If you have credit card debt and car loans where, let's say you have just $10,000 of other debt at an average of 10%, and you can take out a $20,000 HELOC at 6%, and you can pay all that off in one chunk, and then use that cash flow to pay extra principal on your mortgage, okay, that starts to get better. That's outside the scope of my friend's question, and this video is already probably way too long, so just know there's another video to be had on that topic, but for this specific case, just make the extra principal payments. So that's what we're doing with our 3 mortgages. I really wanted it to work because it's over $500,000 of debt to pay down, but even so, the hassle to reward calculation, just do the extra principal payments. One important tip that I learned about making extra principal payments is to make sure they're actually extra principal. If you start paying off your mortgage early like we did, and you just send more money to your bank, what they're probably going to do is treat it as next month's payment, which is not what you want. Because then, let me go over here. So if you pay, what's a good way to show it? Yeah, let's show it here. So what you want is, when you make your extra principal payment, that takes the balance down right away, that full 2646. But if you pay an extra principal payment, they're splitting that into interest and principal again. So I've seen it, and I've had it before, where out of this 2626, you'll pay your $14.97. They'll take another $14.97 for next month, and they'll have it split. So they'll take $1,062 of interest out of that, and then the remaining part, they might apply it as principal, or they might apply it as like part of next month's partial payment. They're just trying to take more interest right away. They don't want you to save all that interest. And that's how the bank makes money, right? So I don't have a great visual for this, but basically on your online banking, sometimes there's a memo line or like notes. Just write in there, principal only, and then monitor it. After that payment goes through, call your bank, like make sure it actually went to principal only. And if you have to talk to someone on the phone, talk to someone on the phone. That can make or break your plan. So just wanted to make sure I threw that in there because learned that one the hard way. Luckily I learned it fast enough, but most people don't talk about that kind of stuff. The actually helpful advice gets overshadowed by this velocity banking sales pitch. So hopefully that helps. This calculator isn't available yet. I gotta clean it up and make it easier to use, but my plan is someday I'll give this away so you can plug in your own numbers. And if you're interested, just comment. And if you think I missed something, also comment, because I hope I said this at the beginning, but I just want this to be as clean and honest of a comparison as I can make. And so I'm not claiming that I've got it perfect yet or already, but so just help me out. And if you think I did something wrong, let me know. I probably don't have to invite you to do that. Most people would probably just yell at me in the comments anyway, but just know I'm not trying to push this as like the ultimate perfect. I'm not perfect. So anyway, we'll stop it here and I'll see you in the next video.